Right.
I'm sitting here with Christina Kruger.
What's going on, Joe?
Not much. Mother of three, grandmother of six, great grandmother of three. So, gonna sit
Oh,
here and
four.
a four.
Four great grandchildren.
Who's the fourth?
Simon,
Oh yeah,
Caleb's
I
boy.
forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, well, we're sitting here, and I figured you should tell us about your life.
Oh my goodness. Well, I was born in Wisconsin, but I never lived there. I grew up in Minnesota. And I had a wonderful childhood with my brothers and sisters, Roger, Carl, Margaret.
How many other siblings did you have?
Originally, siblings. I had seven. My little brother Georgie died as a baby, and then sister and a brother. Carl was born in Billings, Montana, so we lived there for a while. But my first 7 years were in northern Minnesota on this wonderful lake. We got to do everything and boating and catching, snapping turtles, sledding. My dad had a boat works. Well, and he made us toboggans. And he also worked on the Rainy Lake Dam. In the summertime, we picked blueberries at an old logging camp. My brother got lost out picking blueberries. He was gone for several days. He was only about 8 years old, but at night, he just climbed up a tree. He saw some wild pigs, and
Which brother was this?
huh?
Which brother was this?
This was Roger. He's tough. And my mother, we were in this cabin, and she went to find the forest rangers to help her find, because Roger was lost. So she took a lantern and a gun, and off she went down several miles to the shore because the rangers were on an island. So she tried to get their attention by shooting the gun. However, the rangers had picked that time to go in town for supplies. So they weren't there. Well, there she was for a couple days down there waiting for the ranger. Meantime, my brothers and sisters and I were in that kind of a cabin, and I heard a baby cry, and I wanted to go outside and get the baby. Well, my brother Charles, he is my oldest brother, he stopped me because that was no baby, that was a
Peacock?
panther. Yeah, that was a cougar or something.
Hmm.
So anyway, we survived that. Well, then my dad, the rangers came back. She told them they went to town and got my dad. He brought a search party up, and this was like the third or fourth day, and Roger was still missing. But just as they came up, and it was sort of in the evening, Roger came out of the woods all by himself. He said, Dad always told me if I was lost to find a creek and follow it out. It'll come out to the lake and then follow the shore. And that's exactly what he did. Up there, that was the Great North Woods, and many a man was lost, then ran around in circles and never survived. And there my brother kept his head and he survived.
Hmm.
That was a great living in that little town.
I've never heard that story before.
Oh, I got lots of stories.
I know.
Yeah.
I figure we should get them all on tape at some point.
Well, that's a good idea. That's
Yeah.
a good idea.
So,
The only other person that was interested in all my old stories of childhood and all was Lorinda Shutke, but we lost her. So, but I sent them by email to her all the time. So you're the You're the first grandson to be interested,
Well,
Joe.
now we have them all on tape. Maybe next time we should get all the pictures. That's kind of what gave me the idea. Is you're telling me about the different pictures in the room, and I figured we should probably get them all down and set in stone.
It was such an interesting place to live.
Wait, and where? That was in Montana, you said?
This was in Rainier, Minnesota, which was kind of a down the river, down the Rainy River from International Falls, Minnesota, right on the Canadian border. Yeah, we would take the boat to go to town. Whether it's some festivities or something, we just take a boat over there. My dad built boats. He even built one for Major Bowes. He was a famous man. He built one for him. And we lived in an old hotel, an old skinny hotel, like you've probably heard of them, seen them. But we lived upstairs. This is during the Depression. My dad had a boat works downstairs, and there was a little narrow gauge railroad, not almost in our backyard. It ran right through our little town, and there was a station master kind of that he took care of the coal and the water that when you water up the old trains stuff. And but he had a billy goat, and that billy goat was the terror of the whole town. Everybody was afraid of him. So one day we were out playing, and that goat started chasing us. Well, he chased us all the way into our house, and we were going up the stairs, and my youngest sister, she was halfway up the stairs, and the goat was on the stairway, butting her down every time she tried to get up. My dad came out of the shop, heard us screaming. He took a hammer and he gave that goat a big whack. And the whole town was happy that he put that goat out of commission. That was a dead goat by then. It used to get almost like 50 below where we lived. And there'd be giant snowbanks all the way to school. And we'd walk the snowbanks to school. My mother worked at a little tavern just up the block so she could earn enough money to buy us nice warm suits. And we lived in a we went to a 2-story schoolhouse. And it had an outdoor spiral slide. I remember that. And there was 2 outhouses down by the creek, a boys and a girls. Can you imagine the outhouses are right down there by the creek nowadays? So, I was going to tell you about the Indians. The Indians came over from Fort Frances whenever they got their paycheck from the Canadian government. And they would hide their beer to take back. They'd hide it out in the weeds. Well, my brother Roger watched from the upstairs window and see where they're hiding it, and then he went and got it. So that was one of the pranks he did. And one time there was a little, I don't know whether it was a carnival or something. Across from our house was a vacant lot. And that's where the carnival was. And they had ice cream booths and everything. Well, I don't know whether they took an intermission or what, but they left the ice cream booth unguarded. And we just helped ourselves. We had a good... we helped ourselves to the ice cream. Oh, we were ragamuffins.
And that was in Minnesota too?
This is the same town.
Yeah. How old were you then?
Let's see. I must have been 6 because I went to first grade there.
6. You're a criminal. Already.
And then we had an old wagon, and it was somebody needed to grease it, but nobody did, and we we never thought of doing it. And we take it down to the other part of town, and there's this lady. We went by her house, and she'd come out and she'd say, "Go home," says I. "Go home," says I. And we were terrible kids. We mocked her. "Go home," says I. "Go home," says I. But she did not like to hear that wagon go by her house. There was a marine railroad also out behind our place. And my brother almost drowned. There were big barges pulled up to the bank. And the barges had big, wide edges around.
Let's try this.
And we would play on them. We'd run around playing tag, but my brother fell off. And then he couldn't seem to get back up, and there was an older boy there, but he ran to get my mother. Instead of jumping in and getting Roger, he ran to get my mother. And so my mother had to run down there, and she didn't know how to swim, so she had to hold the rope, and she went down there and pulled him back up by his shirt, by the back of his shirt. And she said, "Why?" She asked the older boy, "Why didn't you jump in and save him?" And he said, "I had on a pair of brand new boots." He didn't want to get them wet. You want me to tell more stories?
I want to hear all of
enough,
them.
huh?
I want to hear more stories about you being a criminal.
What's that?
More stories about you being a criminal.
What?
What about the time you found the gun in the woods?
That was when I got older. But there was a big buck deer ran right down through our town and then jumped in the water and off he went to Canada.
Huh.
But
Well, you got any good stories about who had the potato farm? Grandpa's parents or
that's
your parents?
Grandpa's story.
Grandpa's parents had the potato
Yeah.
farm. And then how did you end up getting here?
Well, after they got through building the dam, we had to move because we needed work. My dad needed work. Well, on the way, we stopped at my grandma and Grandpa Shutke's place, and they lived on a big dairy farm. Grandpa Shutke, his name was Herman, George Herman Shutke. He was born in Germany, and he went to college. He was an engineer. He went around building a lot of dams all over Wisconsin and Minnesota. And when there was no more work for that, he bought a farm. So he was a dairy farmer. My grandpa fed a place on my mother's side. He was also a farmer. And my grandma fed a place was a Slayton. So she was related to Deke Slayton, the astronaut. And also, there was another Slayton called Charlie Slayton. And Charlie Slayton had a, let's see, what would you call it? A store way out in the territories, right on the Red River by Minnesota. And I guess you call it a trading post. And he and his boys were real friendly with the Indians. They all got along great. They all rode horses together and everything. But one day, the boys came home and they told their dad, the Indians came to them and said, "You have to leave." Well, it must have been when that big uprising was of all the Sioux chiefs and all them. And there was a big massacre out of that. But they told them they had 2 years to leave. Well, my great-grandpa Charlie Slayton didn't think it meant anything to them because they got along good with the Indians and they had a trading post. Well, the Indians just came to him one night with a wagon and said, "You must leave now because I can't protect you anymore," their Indian friend said. So they left, and then they did run back and get a gun that was over the door. So they got out of there by the shirt of their pants, or whatever you call it. And they went back to Minnesota, or Wisconsin, I think, Barron County, Wisconsin. So somewhere in Moorhead, Minnesota. They say there's still a piece of his trading post in one of the parks. So I'd like to go back someday to see if it's still there.
What piece of what?
My grandpa Charlie, my great grandpa Charlie's trading post with the Indians.
It's just still standing, or there's like a.
They said there was part of it there. Someone told me there was, but we didn't have time to look, and they didn't know which park it was in. So it's still something that I don't know if I'll ever get back now and find out.
Like they picked it up and moved it?
Yeah, they saved it. Yeah,
That's pretty neat.
yeah. So my Charlie Slayton was there before all the Norwegians came later that went to Fargo, and a lot of people think those Norwegians and stuff were the first ones to settle on the Red River, but really it was my grandpa Charlie.
That's pretty neat. And where was your mom from?
Well, my mother was from Wisconsin because she was, her mother was a Slayton, and they're old timers. And the Feta places, they all came over practically on the Mayflower.
Really?
So my mother grew up there. She lived on the farm. And when it got time for her to go to high school, she rode a horse and boarded in town all week and then rode the horse back home.
On the weekends?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's kind of neat.
And I think she had 2 dresses that she could wear. I'm sure they were wool, but what she would do is you change the collar and the cuffs. But she just had 2 dresses for school. Later she became a teacher.
And that was your mom?
Yeah, my mother became a
So
teacher.
she was a teacher and tended bar.
And what?
And she was a bartender too? Is that what you said before?
Oh, no, my mother wasn't a bartender.
Oh. Well, I thought you said somebody tended bar in Wisconsin.
Oh, all right, that was my mother's sister-in-law,
Oh.
Aunt May.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, they had a little, well, in Wisconsin, you can have a bar right in your home, in a little room, front room of your home. It's real friendly back there.
So you just have your friends over and just charge them a
Yeah,
nickel a
and
beer?
outside, there'd be some playground outside. The whole family could come and have a beer in the evening. It's real different than here. And they're all townships. They don't counties, they were townships.
Huh.
Yes.
And then so where, and then your dad, you said, came from the Mayflower?
Oh, no, that's my mother's side. My father was born in Germany. And Grandpa came over, George Schutke came over in the late 1800s. And then my dad was born in 1900, I think. He was 5 years old when he came because Grandpa had to work. I don't know when my grandpa came over, but later he sent for my grandmother and my dad, and they went to Pennsylvania. And in Pennsylvania was born Anne and Hattie and Charlie.
Is that better? Oh, yeah, this is way better. You can hear so much more better.
I can hear you better.
Can you?
Yeah.
Can you hear yourself better? Hello?
Hello?
I'm going to clip. Can you hear yourself better? Huh. There's got to be a way to turn these up. Can you hear me when I talk?
Nothing comes through here.
Well, it's because you got it on backwards.
Oh, these are backwards.
You got both of them on backwards.
Well, fix it for me.
There you go.
Oh dear, that's funny.
And then I like putting these.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I like putting these up here because it blocks a lot of the noise in the room. So I probably won't know till I like really edit it, but. All right. good one. All right. Let's try this again.
All right.
Let's see if we can get this in right there. All right, can you see that?
Well, this picture was taken in 1927, so that makes me 7 years old. No, 37. No, I'm wrong there. 1937. And it was when we left, it was when we left Rainier, Minnesota, and stopped at Grandpa Shutke's farm.
So that's what that picture is.
Can you explain each sibling?
I can't see the picture. Okay. This is the farm. This is the barn. And this is the seed house or whatever, where they kept stuff. This is my brother Chuck. These two girls are my cousins. This is Marlene and Joanne Hanson. This is me, Christina Shutke, my sister Ruth, my sister Margaret, who's 1 year younger than me, and my brother Roger. So if I was 7, Margaret was 6, Roger was 8, and Chuck was 9. Stair steps. This must have been my uncle's car, but that was taken at the Shutke farm.
Those are all your favorites? Those are all your favorites?
Favorites? It's a good memory. It tells a good memory. Well, you were my first grandchild, so that makes you special.
Good. I'd probably say my favorite things was waking up to Christmas morning at the other house in the big sunroom, it coming out, and probably the beanbag year was probably my favorite. There was so much stuff everywhere. There was just beanbags and Legos and toys and crafts and posters and cookies, and I don't even remember. I don't even know how old I was. Well, how old do you think I was? About?
Gosh, 4 maybe. I don't know.
Oh, really? I was
don't
thinking
know.
like maybe 6, maybe 6 or 7, maybe.
Yeah, because your brothers and Caleb was there. Just Caleb and Colby, Hallie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd say that was probably one of the best Christmases ever. So everybody, I don't know, and it snowed. I remember my dad went out on the ice, was trying to show off and fell and hit his head.
Oh,
And everybody was worried about the concussion that he might have.
It was when we had the big pond and we all ice skated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.